Here we are in week 5, our final week of the term, and let's go over what you're doing this week in class. The primary thing you're doing this week in class is your diversity research project. Here we have your learning objectives that are related to that project. You'll also do a course evaluation. You have a video to watch. Make sure you take a look at the Writing Scientific Manuscript Guide, because this is the one that we've been using throughout the term to make sure that you know how to write an introduction, methods, results, discussion, and literature cited for your project. So your project will be based on this week's lab. This week's lab is the barnacle zone. Now, when you go into this week's lab, it's a little bit more complex than what we've seen in the past because it has you open a PDF document so you can take notes on that. So whether you do that on your computer or you print it out, but you will want to be able to take notes along the way because you're going to have to go back and put some results into your paper. So make sure you're documenting as you're going through. You don't want to have to go back and redo the assignment just to get those data. So what you'll be doing is writing a paper with all of these sections in it. So again, you'll want to look at that manuscript guide. You'll have an introduction, methods, results, and discussion, and then you'll have a literature cited section. And you've already written 3 of these parts. You've written an introduction, a methods, and a discussion. Now, you wrote them on different topics. You wrote them on different simulations that you've done throughout the term. This time, you're going to be taking the feedback that you got from those sections and applying it to this particular topic. This is all going to be about the barnacle ecology, but you want to make sure that you think about the different things that were on the rubrics and the comments that were made when I graded your past assignments to make sure that if you had any issues that you correct those before you hand this one in, because this one is worth a lot more points than those weekly assignments were. You want to go through and look at some of the background information that they give you in the Simutext about the barnacles. And so you're going to, in your introduction, provide some background information about barnacles. You're also going to state what your hypotheses are that you're testing in your simulation. Typically, your introduction starts off a little bit more broad, talks about barnacles in general, the ecology of barnacles, some other studies that have been done on barnacles, and then that should lead you into, these are my hypotheses for my experiment. Then you'll talk about the methods. So how were your data collected? Remember, it's not a list of steps. It's not a list of materials. You're going to write this in paragraph format, summarizing what you did to gather your data. Then you're going to have a results section. You're not going to put in all of the raw data. You're going to create some possibly tables or graphs that give a very clear picture of the data that you gathered, and then you're going to refer to those when you discuss it. So you want to have a separate results section where you give a paragraph describing the results and then also some graphs, tables where you summarize those findings. In your discussion is where you want to interpret the meaning of the results. Don't just reword what you found. Tell us what they mean. What does it mean when you look at this figure? What is the biological implication? What is the ecological implication of that finding? And how does that fit back with all of that stuff you said in the introduction? So your discussion should sort of close that loop. You're going to talk about your findings, what they mean, and you're going to tie it back into some of the general concepts that you mentioned in the introduction. You're going to tie it back into some of the previous studies that you mentioned in the introduction. Make sure that you go and look at how your references should be cited. You typically want to have an in-text citation. You are going to paraphrase whatever those authors said. Don't quote them, just paraphrase. But where you've used information from a study and you've talked about what they found, at the end of that sentence, you're going to put the author's last name and year. If it's more than one author, you'll put the first author et al. And the year. And then you also, at the end of it, you want to have a literature cited section where you're going to give the proper full citation for each of those references. These should be scholarly references, and you should take a look at what that proper APA format is. You're going to put all of that together into a paper on this lab that you're running this week on barnacles. Make sure you take a look at the grading rubric as you're putting this together. And again, please make sure that you go back and look at each one of those previous assignments and look at the comments in the rubric So pull up the assignment, look at the rubric, and look at the comments. If you don't see comments on your rubric, then let me know, because I need for you to be able to see those. All of your rubrics should have comments in them, so make sure you can see those. As always, if you have any questions as you're going through this, please let me know. We can arrange a time to meet online for me to try to answer your questions. Hope you have a great week.